How many levers can I hand you that you can, by manipulating, create the widest variety of interesting things? And that's kind of an interesting caveat because it's easy to build a generative system that fills your screen with static, and every setting of the mouse is going to be a different static screen, and they're all different, but they're not interestingly different. And so a lot of what we do in engineering these systems is try to constrain the output space to stuff that, depending on the format, is something that's aesthetically or functionally interesting. But give you the simple, almost somewhat intuitive mapping too as to what this lever is causing. As you move this lever back and forth, you want to see, some obvious kind of connection to the output between like the genotype and the phenotype. So, and that's something that it's not easily engineered, and it's really more almost of a discovery process, which again is why we spend so much time prototyping. And even though we're going to throw away 190 of those 200 prototypes, that was extremely valuable.
So you, at the very beginning of your talk, you mentioned education.
Yep.
And your experience in the education system before your sixth grade and after sixth grade in Montessori, you said, right? How do you see tools like this playing a role in what we consider formal education for young people?
It's tricky to roll the standardized testing because in games, the type of things that they teach tend to, by their very nature, resist standardized testing. Any game, in essence, is... What's that?
Maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think it is, actually. Every game that you buy really is a problem. If you're selling somebody paying you $50 to give them a problem, you say, here, solve this problem. Hopefully the problem is interesting, and they can apply some creativity to it. But really, games are about problem solving. Whether it's, shooting all the guys in that army or building a thriving civilization, the player then, the question is kind of how big is the solution space? Most games have a very constrained, very rigid solution space where there's one way to rescue the princess. I'm much more interested in games that have a very wide solution space, so that there's, a million ways to do it correctly. And that way the players are being much more creative by where they fall in that solution space, and drives me toward kind of more emergent systems that can generate a larger solution space. But it's also really interesting when you put your typical 12-year-old in front of something like this that has a million knobs and buttons and all these possibilities. They just start banging buttons, observing what's happening, and they intuit the rules of the system in the simulation. It's amazing how quickly a 12-year-old can build a mental model from a complex simulation just by sitting there and pressing buttons on their Xbox. Typically you hand that to an adult over 40, and they want to read the manual. They want to know what to do. They want to know if they don't want to fail. And kids embrace failure-based learning. Adults avoid it like the plague. But in essence, kids are practicing the scientific method, right? They sit there, they experiment, they look at the result, they try to build a model in their head, they hypothesize about what the underlying model is, test that, new experiment, and continually refine that internal model. And so kids are very naturally born toward the scientific instinct, and games are probably the one environment where they really get to practice and refine the scientific method, using the scientific method. And I think, in our culture, both parents and a lot of educators don't recognize that as such. They just kind of, games are about the same as drugs. All my kids playing games, too bad, he's addicted. But yeah, and that's an unfortunate kind of cultural position that we're in right now.